Did you know that the Demon King Muzan was married 5 times in the past? Or that Tanjiro is one of only 3 people confirmed to have seen the legendary blue spider lily? Or that 2 of the Hashira actually secretly loved each other? And ironically, one half of that secret relationship is the love Hashira Mitsuri Kanroji. But what's maybe even more incredible is that she's actually the only Hashira who didn't have some sort of horribly traumatic childhood. And that's because she grew up in a basically normal family with 5 kids, where her biggest problem was that her ridiculous physical strength kept scaring away potential husbands. And besides her strength, her pink hair was also a real issue with the guys, but I think it's kind of cool actually, because she's the only anime girl that I know of that has an actual reason for her wacky hair color. And that's because we're being told that hers actually only turned this bright shade of pink because she ate way too much sakura mochi. And so all of this led to Mizuri being pretty depressed at some point. However, she decided she didn't want to fake who she was to find a husband, and so she joined the Demon Slayer Corps after the leader told her that she should embrace her true abilities. Which is when the real drama starts, because she secretly fell in love with one of the other Hashira, who we'll talk about in just a second. But first, we're continuing with the anime characters, the Upper Moon 6 demons, Daki and Gyutaro, who are not nearly as fortunate growing up as Mitsuri. That's because these 2 were actually born to a prostitute mother, and she was such a terrible mom that she actually tried to kill both of her kids. Their mom particularly was jealous of Daki and even tried to cut off her beautiful hair, but Gyutaro went on a rampage to save his sister. However, Gyutaro himself was not quite as fortunate in the looks department, and he was consistently mocked for his appearance, voice, and his poor hygiene, which, I mean, come on, who wouldn't have bad teeth if they were forced to eat bugs and rats to survive? Poor guy. And Gyutaro couldn't always protect Daki though, because years later, when she was a successful oiran, she actually stabbed a samurai for mocking her brother. This made the samurai then furious, and he tied her up and literally burned her alive. Gyutaro barely managed to save her, and he killed the samurai in revenge. And if that wasn't bad enough yet, no one would even help the siblings until the upper rank demon Doma found them and turned them into demons as well. And that's how the pair came to then terrorize the entertainment district for centuries. However, there's another super powerful early story character who I bet you didn't know was mocked for his looks as well. And that is Sankoji Urokodaki, the former water Hashira who first trained Tanjiro, and the current water Hashira Gyu. Among his many other feats, Urokodaki is famous for capturing and imprisoning the hand demon that was the main enemy during Tanjiro's test to become a demon slayer. But despite being crazy strong, he apparently has a quite soft side as well, because demons used to make fun of his gentle features, and this bothered him so much that he started wearing this fox mask to hide his face. And of course, you might recognize these masks because they were also worn by these spirits, Makomo and Sabito. Now, these 2 were orphans who were trained by Urokodaki, and Makomo lived sometime before Sabito, and when she went for her final selection test, she was killed by the hand demon. And yes, the same is true for Sabito, who was also killed by this ugly monstrosity, though apparently Sabito took the test at the same time as Gyu, and he actually saved Gyu during their week on the mountain. However, because of their failures, both of these 2 became spirits who then lived on the mountain, where they helped Tanjiro train as well. And as I just mentioned, their killer was this disgusting looking figure who was captured and imprisoned by Urokodaki. But we also know that the very first person that this demon killed was actually his older brother after he was first turned into a demon, which admittedly is nowhere near as insane as the drum demon's backstory though, because this demon used to be a member of the 12 upper moons, which are the 12 strongest demons in the world. However, he somehow lost his ability to grow stronger from eating humans, so the Demon King Muzan took away his position, and ever since then, the drum demon has been obsessed with growing stronger to regain his position. And actually, another character who lost something very important to him is this guy. Actually, you know what? Wait, pretty much every character in the story has lost someone or something very important to them. Anyways, this is Shinjiro Rengoku, who is the father of the Flame Hashira from the Mugen Train arc. He was married to Ruka and also had another son named Shinjiro. Now, Shinjiro used to be the former Flame Hashira and even saved this guy from his super tragic past, which we'll be discussing in just a moment. But Shinjiro became a deadbeat dad after his wife died. In fact, he was so torn up about his wife's death that when he encountered a lower ranked demon, he took out his anger by cutting it up over and over again, but never actually killing the monster. Which is really messed up. Now, even though demons are mostly all awful monsters, that doesn't mean that they can't have some serious trauma and tragic backstories of their own, which is perfectly shown actually by the Lower Moon 5 demon Rui, who was actually born to a pretty normal family with parents who actually loved him. He was a pretty weak child though, so when Muzan offered to make him a strong demon, he immediately accepted the offer, but after killing a household servant, Rui's parents tried to kill him because they didn't want him to become a monster. Whoops, too late for that, I guess. So Rui actually killed his beloved parents and then spent the next 20 years unsuccessfully trying to recreate that special family vibe with demons that he transformed into fellow spiders. And if you think that that is already twisted, then just wait until you hear about Enmu's disturbing past. That's because when he was human, he could actually not tell the difference from dreams or reality, which sounds interesting, but as an adult, this led to him to pretend to be a doctor, and he could tell patients that they were healed even though they were about to die, which is a pretty messed up thing to do. But that's not even the worst part here, because one day the Demon King was literally in the middle of eating Enmu, but instead of being terrified, he actually praised Muzan, which somehow then convinced him to turn Enmu into a demon. Okay. Wow, I never actually realized how messed up some of the backstories in Demon Slayer actually are until making this video. In fact, the standard backstory for a character is basically just family killed by demons, which is true for these little 3 helpers from the Butterfly Mansion as well, whose names are Sumi, Kyo, and Naho. And the same can be said for Aoi here. However, she has a bit more to her backstory, because at one point she was actually able to pass the test to become a demon slayer, although she claims it was just pure luck. And actually, each of these characters were taken in by the Flower Hashira Shinobu Kocho, whose parents were, you guessed it, also killed by demons. But she and her sister were actually saved by the Stone Hashira, who has literally one of the most heroic backstories in the manga, which we'll discuss in just a second. But one other fact about Shinobu that you might not know is that her uniform was actually supposed to be incredibly revealing, just like Mitsuri's. However, she immediately burned the open-chested jacket and requested a fully buttoned one. And another mind-blowing fact about Shinobu's past is that she became the head of the Butterfly Mansion at just 14 years old. Which again, is kind of wild. I mean, kids in the Demon Slayer world basically seem to become like adults once they hit 10, I guess, but Shinobu only got this role because her older sister Kanae died in battle against the upper-ranked demon, Doma. And before she died, Kanae and Shinobu both rescued this girl from her terrible childhood as well. However, shockingly, it turns out that being a slave wasn't even the worst part of Kanao Tsuyuri's backstory. And that's because she grew up with parents who were so abusive that she literally had a mental breakdown and repressed all of her emotions. Her parents then sold her into slavery, where she was rescued by the Kocho sisters. They took her to the Butterfly Mansion, and she eventually learned flower breathing from just watching Shinobu and Kanae. In fact, this made her so strong that she took the final selection test without her adoptive sister permission. And while Kanao's traumatic past might break your heart just as it did mine, no one should cry over this sickening liar right here, because this is the upper rank 4 demon Hantengu, who was such a frantic liar during his human life that he would commit horrible crimes and then cry and scream that he was innocent. His mind was actually so twisted that he was married multiple times but would always end up killing his own family. However, he was eventually caught and sentenced to death, only to be turned into a demon by Muzan, who does seem to have a great judgment for character already in this video. And while all of this is pretty messed up, his partner in the attack on the Swordsmith village is even more disturbing. And that's because as a child, Gyoko's parents drowned while out fishing at sea, and eventually he saw their bodies washed up on shore and developed a sickening fascination with corpses, and in particular dead fish. This led to his village believing that he had gone insane, which, I mean, fair enough, and eventually Gyoko killed another kid who was making fun of him. However, the murdered kid's parents got their revenge by stabbing Gyoko, but unfortunately for the rest of the world, he somehow managed to survive until he was turned into a demon by, once again, Muzan. Good job, Muzan. Which of course meant that he could continue making his creepy body art until he was finally defeated by the Mist Hashira Muchiro Tokito. But like pretty much all the Hashira, his childhood was awfully tragic once again. Muichiro Muichiro and his twin brother were born into a woodcutting family, but his mom died from illness and his father fell off a cliff. Wow, I guess that's a new way to die in the story. Now, their parents' deaths left the twins to survive on their own. However, the leader of the Demon Slayers actually tried to recruit the boys many times, but Muichiro's brothers always turned them down. So they continued their life until a demon came and attacked them, leaving Muichiro's brother dead. And so, as a result, the Hashira managed to kill the demon, but seeing his brother die literally broke his mind and he lost all of his memories and personality. Luckily, he was then found by the Demon Slayers, and after recovering, he became a Hashira in the insanely short time of 2 months. Which may sound crazy, but it is actually making a lot of sense considering that he has a super strong relative from the past who we will talk about by the end of this video. Though Muichiro is not the only descendant of a super overpowered bloodline, and that's because this flashy Hashira right here came from a legendary clan of shinobi. But as cool as that sounds, Tengen's childhood was pretty awful once again. By the age of 15, he's basically forced into getting married, which I guess isn't all that bad when these 3 are your wives, but the worst part is that he and his 8 siblings were forced to face each other in death matches until only the 2 strongest survived, which again, however, when Tengen then learned that he was actually killing his brothers and sisters, he left the clan once and for all and never returned. And while he was sometimes thinking about wiping out his terrible family altogether, he could never bring himself to actually kill his dad and only remaining brother. Which I guess is honorable in its own way, but it's not the only broken brotherly bond in the story, because Genya and his brother Sanemi have actually never gotten along after their tragic childhoods. Their, once again, abusive father was randomly stabbed by someone in the village, and their mom worked tirelessly to provide for the entire family. That is, of course, until she was turned into a demon and attacked her own family, and all the kids were killed except Genya and his older brother, who somehow managed to kill their demon mom. However, young Genya panicked and shouted at Sanemi for killing their mom, and the 2 have never gotten along since. And later, both boys joined the Demon Slayer Corps, where Genya learned that he cannot use breathing techniques, but he does actually have the super rare ability to consume demon flesh and gain some demonic strength and healing. And of course, Genya's heroics during the Swordsmith Village arc helped save everyone's favorite swordsmith, Hagenzuka. Apparently, his massive temper tantrums have always been an issue ever since he was a kid, and he even caused his parents to have mental breakdowns, which resulted in Hagenzuka being raised by the village chief instead. Which honestly, based on how many orphans there actually are in the story, apparently, it is a really good thing that there also are equally as many old men willing to take these kids in, apparently. Because even Zenitsu was not raised by his parents. In fact, when he was on his own as a kid, he gave all his money to some random crush who then stole it and ran away with another guy. Poor dude, lost it all for love. But this left Zenitsu in a terrible debt until this old man Jigoro took him in and trained him as a swordsman. However, Zenitsu was so scared of training that one day he climbed a tree and was then struck by lightning, which permanently changed his hair to its now very popular yellow. And while this made Jigoro furious, he still cared for Zenitsu like a son. And this is a pretty cool trainer to have, I'd say, since he was a former Thunder Hashira who only retired when he lost his leg during a battle when he was like 35 years old. On the other hand, one character who isn't as cool is the Temari demon from season 1, Susamaru, who apparently loved to play with these handballs even as a human. Then we have Murata, who was one of the only survivors of the spider demon attack on Mount Natagumo, though apparently before becoming a demon slayer, a girl he liked complimented his hair, which is why he regularly grooms and applies camellia oil to keep it silky smooth. Nice to know, I guess, that someone at least in this dangerous wild world of Demon Slayer actually takes care of themselves. And next up is the man who saved Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke after the Entertainment District arc, which is Goto, a member of the cleanup brigade. But did you know that he actually was worthy of becoming a Demon Slayer himself? However, he did choose in the end to be one of the helpers instead. I wonder why that was. Just like I'm also wondering why you're not subscribed to the channel, but you can do it right now. So go ahead and click that button for even more amazing anime content. But for one of the characters you would never expect to play an important role next, this is Yushiro, who was once a sick boy under the care of the gentle demon Tamayo. And with Yushiro about to die, Tamayo asked if he wanted to become a kind demon just like herself so that he could live. He agreed, and as a result, he's been at her side ever since. However, he actually loves Tamayo deeply, which may sound childish, but their bond actually plays a huge role at the end of the story. Now, at this point, you might be wondering where our main character is, but don't worry because we will be getting to him very soon. But first, did you know that Tanjiro's mother, Kie Kamado, actually knows where to find the legendary blue spider lily flowers? That's because we learned in the special fan book number 2 that she knew where to find the special flower, and we even see that Tanjiro had a flashback to the flower during his fight with Rui. But that's not all that we know about Kie, because apparently she once killed a wild boar with her incredibly hard head. So it does seem like we finally know where Tanjiro got that special ability from as well. But of course, as you know, it's not the only special ability in the family, because Tanjiro's father, Tanjiro, was able to use the legendary sun breathing, which of course has been passed down through their family lineage. Tanjiro was also incredibly strong, though he had no connection with the Demon Slayer core. However, there was one even more legendary ability that we learn later on in the story, which he also passed down to his son. More on that in a second. But first, we have Tanjiro's siblings, Takeo, Hanako, Shigeru, and Rokuto, who were all killed by Muzan. And of course, we can't forget Nezuko, who helped the family by going without new clothes and other items to make sure that all of them had food. And in fact, before the incident, she was most often helping her mother around the house. Which does now bring us to Tanjiro. And we've just discussed his family and their humble upbringing, but there were a few other exciting events throughout the early parts of his life that we need to talk about. Like when he, for example, got his famous scar after saving his brother from a hot kettle. He also learned the basics of sun breathing by watching his father perform the traditional rituals, but there is one scene from later on in the manga that also showed us that his father could use the overpowered ability Transparent Worlds. Now, this super rare ability lets you see through someone's skin down to their muscles and bones. We know this because in chapter 151, his sickly father easily killed a massive bear. His father then told him that with enough practice, his mind would not need to think, but he could just be able to react to what he was seeing. Unfortunately, the father then died from his illness just a few days later, and Tanjiro then inherited the Hanafuda earrings. And as sad as it is to see Tanjiro lose his father, at least he had a solid family for almost his entire life, because the same can't be said for Inosuke. Well, at least not a human family. Of course, he did have parents, but his mother fled with baby Inosuke because his father was horribly abusive once again, and they eventually came to this twisted cult here who worshipped the Upper Moon 2 demon Doma, but when his mother realized that Doma was eating people alive, she then ran away once again. Unfortunately, Doma ended up chasing her, and she was forced to throw baby Inosuke into a river before Doma caught up and ate her. Eventually, Inosuke was then found by wild boars, which is how he grew up until he became a demon slayer. Which, you know, actually turned out pretty well for him, but it all started once again with another deadbeat husband, and I'm kind of starting to think that they are almost as evil as all the demons in the story. I mean, another example of this is from the Biwa demon's backstory from later on in the manga. That's because when she was a human, she was a decent Biwa player who struggled to make much money. However, her husband would then gamble away even the little money that they had, and when he sold her only nice kimono, she got so furious that she straight up killed him. However, that very same night when she went on stage to perform, her musical performance was so amazing that she actually continued to commit murder every time that she had a performance. And this continued until she tried to, you know, kill Muzan, but he then at least turned her into a demon, I guess. So again, who is the real evil here? Demons or awful husbands? I mean, Muzan technically is both, which just goes to show that good dads are super rare, just like Tanjiro's great ancestor, Sumiyoshi Kamado. Now, this man lived with his wife Suyako and their daughter Sumire about 500 years before the current storyline. This family was actually attacked by demons and luckily saved by the legendary swordsman Yoriichi, who we'll discuss in full detail in just a moment. But this was a super important moment for the story because Sumiyoshi then became friends with Yoriichi, and eventually the troubled swordsman told Tanjiro's ancestor his entire life story. And of course, the most important part was that Yoriichi showed Sumiyoshi sun breathing, which is how it got passed down the family line all the way to Tanjiro. But of course, the original Sunbreather has also one of the most intense and also complicated backstories in the entire story. Now, this is Yoriichi Tsugikuni, who lived around 500 years ago. He is literally the strongest demon slayer ever and was the one who first created the breathing styles of fighting. Yoriichi grew up with his twin brother Michikatsu, and when they were growing up, he was a very quiet, kind child who took care of his sick mother. However, he literally did not speak at all as a kid, so his father was going to send him to a temple. And this is actually how he first got the Hanafuda earrings, because his mother gave them to him because she hoped that they would help him finally speak. However, everyone lost their minds when they saw him do this during sword practice. While his brother struggled to even touch the instructor, Yoriichi picked up the practice sword for the very first time. He then instantly struck the teacher 4 times and left him with massive bumps and bruises, which left everyone mind blown. But the excitement was very short-lived because Yoriichi didn't like the feeling of hitting someone, so he did not end up picking up a weapon again while he lived at home. Nonetheless, his legendary strength meant that his father instantly started to show him more affection. He then decided to send his twin brother to the temple instead of Yoriichi, which a kind of mean move there. And this of course made his younger brother incredibly jealous, but Yoriichi's super insane strength was not the only thing that separated the two brothers. That's because Yoriichi was actually born with the Demon Slayer mark, which basically makes a person much stronger, and he could even naturally see the transparent world, which was how he knew that his mother was sick when no one else did. And when their mother finally died of her illness, Yoriichi decided to leave home so that his brother would not be sent to the temple after all. Then, after leaving, he met his wife Uta, and years later they were about to have a baby. But just like any happy thing in any of these backstories so far, a demon came and messed things up really bad for them. And so while Yoriichi was going to get a midwife to help his wife give birth, Uta was attacked and killed. This drove Yoriichi to intense sadness, and he even held his wife's body for 10 days straight. And after his time of grieving, he then became a demon slayer, which of course was a completely game-changing moment. And that's because of his natural talents. He taught the other slayers everything that he knew, which included adapting sun breathing into new breathing styles to suit each individual person. Years later, Yoriichi then encountered Muzan and Tamayo, and while the Demon King was a genuine threat, the legendary demon slayer instantly defeated him, and the demon only barely managed to escape. And then Yoriichi just let Tamayo go free, but next we have the probably dumbest moment in the entire story. And that's because soon after this event, several other Demon Slayers confronted Yoriichi and kicked him out of the Demon Slayer Corps because his brother had become a demon too, which we'll discuss more in just a moment, which is just absolutely crazy, but is the reason that he eventually went to talk with Sumiyoshi Kamado about his life, so I guess it kind of ended up working out in the end. And now skipping ahead 60 years into the future, Yoriichi encountered with his demon brother one last time, but actually died of old age during the battle, which literally drove his brother mad with rage. I mean, how would you feel if you spent your entire life trying to beat your brother, but then when you finally have a chance, he dies of old age? I mean, talk about frustrating, right? But despite everything his brother did, Yoriichi still treasured a small flute that his brother gave him when they were kids. And so let's now back up a little bit and talk about Michikatsu, Yoriichi's brother, because he then goes on later to become the Upper Moon One, Kokushibo. Now, I just explained about their shared childhood and how Michikatsu went from being the favorite child to being the outcast. But once Yoriichi left, Michikatsu eventually became the lord of his family house. He did marry and have children, but then one day a demon killed his soldiers while they were out in the woods. Luckily, Michikatsu was saved by Yoriichi, who was a demon slayer at this point, and it was at that time that Michikatsu decided to leave everything behind and become a demon slayer as well. He very quickly learned his own breathing style, which of course needed to be moon breathing, and got his own demon slayer mark as well. However, getting this mark was actually the start of his downfall, because every demon slayer with the mark besides Yoriichi died before their mid-20s. And so Michikatsu became obsessed with survival, and this eventually led to his encounter with Muzan. And so because of his intense desire to live, Michikatsu agreed to become a demon and transformed into Kokushibo. And then after years of killing humans, humans, including the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, Kokushibo became the Upper Moon 1, and together with Muzan, they wiped out every single Demon Slayer who used the sun breathing style. But fast forward 60 years, and Kokushibo only survived the battle with Yoriichi because his brother died, again, of old age. This basically left him constantly angry at his brother, even though he ended up taking his brother's treasured flute and keeping it himself. But that's actually not the end of his fascinating backstory, because remember the wife and kids that he left behind to become a demon slayer? Well, that family actually were the past relatives of the Mist Hashira Muichiro Tokito that we mentioned earlier. Which I guess explains exactly why Muichiro was so naturally talented, because he was related to Kokushibo and Yoriichi. And while Muichiro eventually helped defeat Kokushibo, he certainly wasn't alone. Sanemi, the Wind Hashira, also took part in that battle, and as we already explained with Genya, he had the unfortunate task of killing his mother, who had transformed into a demon in the past. But that actually isn't the end of his sad story, because after roaming around killing demons on his own, he was then found by a demon slayer named Masachika, who brought Sanemi to a demon slayer trainer so that he could join the Corps. Now, these two basically became like brothers, but when they fought the lower rank 1 demon, and so this tragedy made Sanemi really furious, and he even snapped at the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps before reading his dead friend's will, which calmed him down a little bit. And another one of the participants of this legendary battle is the strongest current Demon Slayer, the Stone Hashira Gyome Himejima. And oh boy, he has also one of the wildest backstories in the story. His mother died giving birth to him, and his father died of some sort of illness. And to make things worse, a fever caused him to go blind as a child very early on. Eventually, he was living in a temple with a bunch of other orphan kids. However, things went terribly wrong when one of the kids let a demon right to them. The demon then killed most of the kids, even though Gyome tried to save them. And in the end, the only one who survived was the youngest girl, who's just stayed behind Gyome while he was punching the demon until the sun rose. However, unfortunately, this is not a happy ending, because that little girl got confused and actually started babbling that Gyome was a monster. This made people believe that Gyome had actually killed all the other kids, and he was sentenced to execution, which is where he was headed until he was saved by the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, who brought him in to become a demon slayer. And all of that happened because of this slimy kid right here. Kaigaku was living in the temple, but was actually stealing their money. One night he was caught by the other kids and forced out, but he then ran into a demon. And then in order to save his own life, he led the demon to the others, which resulted in the tragic bloodbath. But that's not the end of the story here, because eventually he was taken in by Jigoro, the former Thunder Hashira, and trained alongside Zenitsu. However, only shortly after becoming a demon slayer, he then ran into Kokushibo, and he chose to become a demon instead of dying. In other words, truly, he is one of the worst people in the entire story. Which actually is kind of crazy that he became a demon slayer in the first place, because usually Kagaya Ubuyashiki is really good at understanding people. I mean, he basically recruited all of the Hashira by himself, and he has even earned all of their respect despite his crippling illness. And if you didn't know, that illness runs throughout his family because of their blood relation to Muzan. It's basically a sort of curse that kills all the men before they turn 30, and the women have to remarry and change their name, or they will die as well. Even Kagaya's father killed himself when he was just 19 years old because he couldn't handle seeing so many demon slayers constantly dying. As a result, this left Kagaya in charge at the age of only 4 years old, which is just absolutely stupid, honestly. And then when he was 13, his wife Amane was selected to marry him. Again, what's with the ages here? Although he would only agree to marry her if she actually wanted to, which obviously she did, and she later gave birth to the quintuplets Hinaki, Nichika, Kiriya, Kuina, and Kanata. And oh boy, 5 kids at once. But one thing that Kagaya can't do for himself is fight, which is exactly the specialty of the Upper Moon 3, Akaza. As a kid, his father was very sick, and so since they didn't have any money, Akaza would go out and steal to pay for his father's medicine. However, he ended up being caught, and his father then committed suicide out of shame, which, I mean, oh boy, the fathers. And then after this, Akaza was banished, and he was eventually found by the leader of a dojo. After living at the dojo for a few years, Akaza became an incredibly strong fighter and was even going to marry the leader's daughter. However, of course, I mean, this is Demon Slayer, we can't just have a happy backstory, so in this case, a jealous rival dojo leader poisoned their drinking water. The dojo leader and his daughter drank the poisoned water and died immediately, which sent Akaza into a rage, and he literally killed all 67 members of the other dojo with his bare hands. I mean, even as a human, what an absolute monster. And as a result, this display caught, of course, the attention of Muzan, who then turned Akaza into a demon, which of course came during the battle against Tanjiro and Gyu. And speaking of the water Hashira, he grew up with his older sister, but one day she sacrificed herself to protect him from, you guessed it, a demon. And after this, he was sent away to a distant relative, but he ran away instead. However, this turned out to almost be a very bad decision because he got lost and nearly died on a mountain. The only reason he survived is because he was rescued and trained by Urokodaki, which sent him on a path to become a demon slayer. Now, we've already talked about the equally tragic backstories of the Upper Moon 1 and 3, but Upper Moon 2, Doma's childhood was actually fairly okay in comparison. He was born with extraordinary good looks, and for some reason people believed that he could communicate with the gods. As a result, they kind of formed this cult with him as the leader, and even though Doma never believed any of this, one day his mother killed his father because he was cheating on him, and then she committed suicide. Now, Doma didn't really care about any of this, which is, you know, normal, and at 20 years old he was then turned into a demon by Muzan. He still kept the cult going though, but now he would eat the followers whenever he was hungry, and yeah, I mean, weird, but I guess different from the other backstories we've had so far. Which actually now brings us to some of the most important backstories in all of Demon Slayer. Starting with Oba Naigoro, who has maybe the most tragic backstory in the entire story, which, I mean, if you've been watching this video throughout so far, you will know means a lot. Basically, he was born to a clan of thieves who worshipped a snake demon. However, this clan almost never had male children, so the snake demon took a very special interest in him. They even kept him locked up in a cage for most of his childhood, and the snake demon would then just watch him late at night, which, I mean, yikes, super creepy. Let's not think about it too much. And years later, when he was at 12 years old, he was let out of the cage for the very first time, and he was immediately brought to the snake demon. And this was very, very bad for Obanai because the snake ordered that his mouth be cut open, kind of like the Joker, so that it matched the snake's, which... And after this, Obanai was, of course, understandably desperate to escape, and really his only happiness came from this little snake buddy who he became close friends with. And when the snake demon found out, she was of course furious and killed nearly his entire family before trying to recapture Obanai. Fortunately though, he was then actually saved by the former flame Hashira, Shinjiro Rengoku, which led Obanai to join the Demon Slayers because of his deep hatred for the demons. Interestingly, he also had a deep fear and hatred of women, since his whole family that kept him locked up were women, although it is implied that he actually fell in love with Mitsuri, and it turns out that she loved him as well, so at least he got some small joy before they then both died. No happy ends. Which brings us to another demon hater, although this one is a demon himself, which is Tamayo, who is the demon researching a cure to turn Nezuko back into a human. And interestingly enough, her backstory began over 500 years ago. That's because when she was 19, she fell ill and was desperate for a cure. She then met Muzan, who said he could cure her, but he actually just turned her into a demon instead. Which, I mean, Muzan is always best man, but after her transformation, she mindlessly killed her husband and children, which did leave her incredibly sad, understandably. At some point, she even tried to kill Muzan, but she failed, and this basically broke her spirits. As a result, she gave up and basically ended up serving Muzan until she broke free from his control after the fight with Yoriichi. Then, from this point on, she stopped killing people and eventually was able to live only by drinking blood, even though it pained her not to eat people. And then over the next 200 years, she researched and learned enough about medicine and science to modify her body to not need to eat humans anymore at all. Which of course now brings us to the biggest demon, and not a weird person at all, Muzan. And his backstory tells us exactly how demons actually came to exist. That's because over 1,000 years ago, Muzan was a sick human who nearly died in his mother's womb. He was actually going to be cremated because his family thought that he was dead, but they only took him out of the fire when he finally cried out loud. Though life did not get much better because his weak body kept getting worse. At some point, point, he started a very experimental treatment from this very random doctor, but Muzan was so frustrated that it wasn't working that he actually eventually killed the doctor. And only then did he realize that the medicine was actually making him stronger, though in the end, it actually just ended up turning him into the very first demon, which I guess kind of mean that they don't give us a backstory on the doctor, but from this time on, he started eating humans and grew stronger, with his main goal being to overcome his weakness to the sun. And he tried to do this in two ways. First, by finding the blue spider lily flower, which was part of the medicine that he took, which he was never able to accomplish. And the second way was to constantly make demons so that one day a demon might have the power to resist the sun. But maybe the most unexpected thing about Muzan was that during his early years as a demon, he actually settled down with a woman 5 times. However, in the end, each of these relationships ended with his wife committing suicide because he was a very abusive husband, which we did not see coming throughout this video at all, which definitely makes him the worst of the worst demon and deadbeat husband. Ugh, the horror combo. And then over the centuries, he created the upper and lower moons by forcefully turning strong people into demons. However, one strong fighter who chose to die instead of becoming a demon was of course the Flame Hashira Kyoguro Rengoku. His life ended after saving Tanjiro and the others during the Mugen Train arc. And while I already told you about his mom dying, another fact from his past that you might not know is that during his first mission as a demon slayer, he actually ruptured his own eardrums to overcome a flute demon's special abilities. Like saying, talk about dedication to killing demons, I guess, which is of course why he chose to die instead of becoming a demon himself. But I've actually always wondered what might have happened if he had actually chosen to live instead. Like, would he have become a good demon, or might he even have had the potential to become the strongest demon ever? Well, you can learn the answer to all of these questions by watching this video right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.